Hail, Internet! It's Matt here for the Dork Lords. Unfortunately, Paul unable to join us today to talk about Altered Carbon. So we'll catch up on Altered Carbon next week, along with Counterpart. So I thought I would take the advantage of the situation to do a Dork Rant. Dork Rants are basically me chatting about things that I feel passionately about. And so in this case, it's going to be what went wrong with the Hobbit movies. Now, if you've watched Dork Lords at all, you'd realize that I pretty much bring Lord of the Rings into anything we talk about. So, of course, I would talk about The Hobbit because it's not as good as Lord of the Rings. Yeah, let's chat about this for a second. So, obviously, I'm a Tolkien nerd. I've read all this stuff, and I'm committed to Tolkien and Middle Earth stuff. And I really enjoyed the Lord of the Rings movies. Sure, there's some differences to the books, but I thought Peter Jackson really handled the adaptation very, very well and pulled off an amazing, high-quality trilogy of movies. So when it came time to, Peter Jackson's going to be doing The Hobbit. Perfect. What better choice? This is going to be great. And it wasn't like it was a complete failure. There are moments that I really enjoy in those movies. You've got the Unexpected Journey, Desolation of Smaug, Battle of the Five Armies. So, for instance, the Riddles in the Dark scene, which I think is the first scene that they filmed, in the whole trilogy, beautiful. I mean, it felt like it was straight out of the book. Gollum and Bilbo squaring off, in the cave, and Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis just knocked it out of the park. Beautiful scene. A scene from Desolation of Smaug, again, which felt very out of the book moment, was the party's in Mirkwood. Bilbo climbs a tree and he gets above the tree line and he takes his first kind of clean breath, and there's all the butterflies flying around, and he sees the mountain. He sees, oh my goodness, we're really close to the end of our journey. Beautiful, beautiful moment. Great scene. So there are things like that are great, and I've watched all the movies, and I did enjoy them to some degree, but it was frustrating that there were some choices that Peter Jackson made that I felt just held these movies back. One of them, I'll just throw it out there right away, just a maddening choice for a character was the character of Alfred. He's the second in command to the Master of Lake Town. We meet him somewhat briefly in the Desolation of Smaug, and then he's in the movie way too much in the Battle of the Five Armies. He's not from the book. It's a character that Peter Jackson just decided, you know what we need? We need a Jar Jar Binks in this thing. Let's put him in. And so I don't know. I know I think the attempt is to be comic relief, which is somewhat ill-considered anyway, but let's assume comic relief was his thing. Well, he's too sinister-y, assholey to be a genuine comic relief character. And he's just annoying. Every time he's on the screen, you just want him to go away, and you wonder why he's there at all. Much less why people would even depend on him. You have these moments where, like, Gandalf's entrusting him to be a lookout, and you're like, what? Why would you? Anyway, I can imagine chopping the 15 or 20 minutes out of Battle of Five Armies that Alfred's in, and then, hey, maybe you just make a shorter movie, or you could replace it with some footage that I think would have helped The Hobbit, which would be connective tissue between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So perhaps you get to the end of the Battle of Five Armies, you have the funeral for Thorin, and then we kind of do like a little montage of what happened after, but prior to Lord of the Rings. You could have, what I would love would have been Balin leading the company to Moria. We see his tomb in Lord of the Rings. Ori, little slingshot Ori, went on that journey as well. And so you could have the two of them going off. Ori was the scribe. Theoretically, Ori is the skeleton holding that book in the Fellowship of the Ring. When they pull, and his like hand comes off with it, because he was the scribe, so he would have been writing in the journal. That would have been his job. So just that would have been really cool to see them, like basically, we're going to go and liberate Moria for the dwarves again, and da-da-da-da-da-da, and maybe you see them entering Moria or something like that, and that's all you would need. It would be an amazing scene. You could show something regarding the tracking of Gollum. There's a big thing where Gandalf sent Aragorn to track down Gollum, who was captured by Sauron. Sauron let him go, and eventually, after tracking him for a long while, Aragorn captures him, brings him back to Mirkwood. You've got Thranduil, you've got Gandalf, you've got Aragorn, you've got Gollum. They're all in one place. It would have been, again, some really cool connective tissue, because that's what leads to this, we should have a council and try to figure out what to do, what's going on. Anyway, so things like that. I thought he missed the boat on trying to connect these two big trilogies that he did, and he just wasted a lot of time with this Alfred character that I just could not stand. Some people had trouble with the character of Toriel. I didn't. I thought that was totally within the scope of the book. We learned that they were the Mirkwood elves under Thranduil. I assumed Legolas would be in this movie, even though he's not named in The Hobbit, because, he's Thranduil's son. They were hanging out in Mirkwood. Why not be there? So the idea that there were other elves, including Toriel, I was cool with that. That was good. Now, the relationship she has with Keeley felt really forced. The amount of screen time they even spent together, for them to be so truly in love, felt wrong, and it didn't work. The fact that Peter Jackson actually had to have Thranduil say at the end, "It was real," regarding their love for each other, meant to me that even Peter Jackson was like, I don't think the audience is buying this. Let me have one of the major characters tell you, it's real, damn it. And so that fell flat, and I don't know, I didn't buy it. And so that every time they tried to push that element, it just the momentum of these movies kind of fell apart. And another thing that bothered me, now this was actually interesting. I watched an interview that Peter Jackson gave after these movies were made, and he was very forthcoming. He basically publicly admitted, hey, as we were getting to the end of filming The Desolation of Smaug, which it wasn't called Desolation of Smaug at that point, it was just going to be the end. It was going to be two movies. The book and two movies. So the end of the second movie was going to be the Battle of the Five Armies. They're trying to film it. He didn't have a shot list. They hadn't blocked it out. They were just trying to do it on the fly. And he was just exasperated with, I don't know how to do this. I'm supposed to finish this movie, and I literally haven't planned the giant set piece battle that I intend to do in this thing. And so what he did, which I suppose was, the best idea at the time, was he went to the studio and was like, look, I'm not ready. I can't effectively do this battle. So let's make a third movie of that battle, and I'll do that. And they gave him permission, like, all right, we'll make this a trilogy. The Battle of Five Armies will be in the third movie. So what he then felt he needed to do, which I would argue he didn't, but he felt like he needed some other big set piece finale for The Desolation of Smaug. Like, I need to finish my movie. I think he could have just finished it. The chapter could have ended at the same place where the book might have ended, where Bilbo is sent in. You go into the mountain. Puts the ring on. Has this great conversation with Smaug. Smaug assumes he's from Lake Town. Flies off, and they're kind of trapped in the mountain. And Smaug is heading off toward Lake Town to do destruction. Boom. Which is basically what he ended up having Smaug flying off to Lake Town anyway. But the big difference from the book to the movie, and what I think Peter Jackson basically was trying to do filler, was having this Thorin and the dwarves fighting Smaug in Lonely Mountain. That whole piece, it goes for a while. Because they try different techniques, and they fail, and they cover him in gold, and then like, all of that felt like a giant waste of time. None of the dwarves died or were negatively impacted in any way. There were no consequences. The fact that Smaug just takes off the same way he would have otherwise, you could just kind of snip that. You snip out the Alfred from Battle of the Five Armies, and you snip out Smaug versus the dwarves in Desolation of Smaug. I think you make both of those movies much, much better. And I feel like the only thing that you really succeeded in doing by having Smaug face off against the dwarves was you made Smaug a less credible threat. Like, the fact that these 13 characters, or there weren't 13 of them, but anyway, there were, 7 dwarves running around, and none of them got injured. They could stand face to face with Smaug fighting him. Sure, they were, we're in danger, we should take cover, but Smaug feels almost like a god-level villain. And for him just to be kind of, brought to a standstill by just a small group of guys, it just felt wrong. It just made me feel like, oh, Smaug's not that invincible. Jeez, these guys got one over on him. So it just didn't. I wasn't a big fan of that scene, and I thought it kind of again slowed the momentum down. And then I guess the final thing would be that the book is called The Hobbit. The movies were called The Hobbit. And Bilbo really was not the focal point of these movies. He becomes less of a focal point as the movies go along. He's much more the focal point in An Unexpected Journey, I would argue. The scenes in his house are pretty much straight out of the book, and they're great. But then as you get to by the end, I would argue it's more Thorin's story. And Richard Armitage does a great job as Thorin, and his death scene is actually very emotional, very moving. There's a lot to like there, but Bilbo becomes a bit player in his own story, and it felt like just maybe more focus. You got Martin Freeman, an amazing actor. Give him more to do. It was Bilbo's story to tell, and I felt like it became more of like a theme park. Hey, look, let's do this fun action thing on the river where they're shooting and they're in barrels and blah, 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 and they're trying to fight Smaug and they're pouring gold on him, and it just the focus of The Hobbit was lost in that situation. Anyway, so there you go. That's my dork rant. Thank you for listening on my What Went Wrong with the Hobbit movies. We'll be back next week for the counterpart recap and a whole bunch of Altered Carbon. So subscribe if you want to get notifications for that. Make some comments if you wish. If you want to argue with me on your thoughts on either what went right or what went wrong with The Hobbit, please feel free to make those comments, and I will reply. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.